"We have a dress code," the hostess said flatly, folding her arms. "We don't serve performers in costume." She didn't lower her voice. She didn't blink. Her tone cut straight through the ambient murmur of the restaurant's lobby, drawing the eyes of nearby guests and staff alike. Standing just inside the entrance of La Couronne, one of London's most exclusive fine dining establishments, was Corporal James Ellis of the Queen's Guard, dressed in full ceremonial uniform. Crimson tunic, gleaming white gloves, towering bearskin hat. He wasn't on duty. He wasn't seeking attention. He had a reservation. But none of that mattered to her. He didn't protest. He didn't explain further. He simply stood, steady, respectful, and silent. But what that hostess didn't know, and what the restaurant would only come to understand far too late, was that this man's quiet dignity would make headlines before the night was over. Because 6 hours later, the lobby of La Couronne would be flooded with photographers, reporters, and a representative from Buckingham Palace, and everything would change. Before we show you what happened next, hit subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. Corporal James Ellis had spent the last 12 years of his life in silent service, one of the Queen's Guard, trained to stand still through the cold, the rain, the noise, and the tourists. He wasn't loud, he wasn't flashy, he didn't seek recognition. But behind that stillness was a lifetime of discipline, pride, and quiet strength. He rarely dined out. He never asked for attention. But today was different. He had made the reservation over a year ago, carefully saving from modest paychecks each month. It wasn't for himself. It was in honor of his father, a former guardsman who had served with the same pride decades before. The night James received word of his father's retirement, he made a promise. "One day, I'll take you somewhere that matches the uniform." But time had other plans. His father passed away months before the date ever arrived. Still, James kept the reservation. He dressed that evening not out of ceremony, but out of respect. He wore the uniform, not for the stares, but because it was the closest thing he had left to standing beside the man who once wore it before him. Tonight was meant to be a quiet tribute. He never expected it to become a public reckoning. La Couronne stood glowing at the corner of a quiet Mayfair street, its windows spilling warm light onto the polished pavement outside. Inside, everything moved with quiet elegance. Tuxedoed staff glided between tables, champagne glasses chimed softly, and the dining room buzzed with the kind of conversations that never raised their voices. It was a place for diplomats, foreign royalty, and billionaires, the kind of place where names were dropped as casually as napkins. When Corporal James Ellis stepped through the doors in full ceremonial uniform, the effect was instant. Conversation slowed. Heads turned. A few guests stared with curiosity, others with admiration. Some looked amused, as if uncertain whether he was part of some elaborate publicity stunt. But James wasn't here for a show. He was here for a reservation. The hostess spotted him immediately. Her practiced smile froze for a split second before she stepped around the podium and intercepted him at the entrance. "Sir," she said, her voice tight behind forced politeness, "this is fine dining. We can't seat you dressed like that." James met her eyes calmly. "I have a reservation, Alice, for one." She didn't check. Her fingers didn't move toward the screen. Her expression didn't change. "You'll need to come back when you're dressed properly," she said dismissively. James glanced down, just briefly, at the uniform he had polished an hour before. Every button straight, every seam ironed, every crease crisp, just like his father had taught him. He said nothing more. He simply nodded. "I understand," he said quietly. Then he stepped aside, letting others pass him. Around him, the soft hum of luxury returned. But the message was clear. In a place that claimed to serve royalty, his uniform had no place at the table. The tension didn't go unnoticed. A few nearby guests had paused mid-sentence, their attention fixed on the exchange between the hostess and the man in red. Some whispered quietly, others simply stared. One tourist, an American with a camera around his neck, approached hesitantly and asked if he could take a photo with James. "He's one of the real ones, right? From the palace." Before James could respond, the hostess snapped sharply, "Sir, we don't allow photography in the lobby." Her voice was louder this time, less polished, more annoyed. The tourist backed off, embarrassed. The moment grew heavier. James didn't react. He stepped back from the entrance, calmly removed a small phone from his pocket, and dialed the restaurant's reservation line. He spoke quietly, identifying himself and confirming that he did in fact have a booking for that evening. The voice on the other end sounded distracted, and after a brief pause, curtly told him they had no record under that name. "I see," James replied. "No worries at all. Thank you." He ended the call, slid the phone back into his pocket, and gave the hostess a small nod of gratitude. Then, without further comment, he turned and walked out the door, his posture straight, his pace even, not a single word of protest passing his lips. He didn't make a scene. He didn't raise his voice. But everyone who had witnessed the moment felt something shift, because he left with his dignity intact, even after it had been denied a place at the table. James had only walked 2 blocks from the restaurant when he heard a voice call out behind him, "Excuse me, young man." He turned to find an elderly couple standing beneath the soft glow of a street lamp. The man wore a dark overcoat, his silver hair perfectly parted, while the woman clutched a small designer handbag with both hands. Their expressions weren't curious. They were concerned. "We saw what happened," the woman said gently. "Utterly disgraceful." The man stepped forward. "James Ellis, is it?" His tone was formal but kind. James nodded. "I recognized the badge. Coldstream Guards. I wore the same uniform 53 years ago." He extended his hand. "Lord Whitmore." James hesitated only a moment before shaking it. "An honor, sir." Lord Whitmore's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in quiet focus. "You handled that with more dignity than most men twice your age would have mustered. That kind of silence speaks volumes." He didn't ask for James's permission. He simply reached into his coat pocket, retrieved an older model phone, and began dialing. "I'm not calling the press," he said, as if reading James's thoughts. "But I do still have friends, in the right places." That evening, long after James had returned to his barracks, his phone rang again. "Unknown number," he answered. "Corporal Ellis," the voice said, "this is the office of the private secretary to His Royal Highness, Prince William. We were informed of an incident earlier today involving a member of the Royal Guard." Before James could fully process the call, another came in, this time from the general manager of La Couronne. "We sincerely apologize for earlier," the man said, voice low and urgent. "We'd be honored if you would allow us to welcome you properly tomorrow evening. We've reserved a table, private room, no wait, and full staff prepared to receive you. Please, Corporal, it would mean a great deal." James didn't respond right away, but in just a few short hours, everything had shifted. Not because he raised his voice, but because someone else had noticed how quietly he'd carried his honor. The following evening, as the sun dipped behind the London skyline, the quiet street outside La Couronne was anything but quiet. A small crowd had gathered, not to dine, but to watch. Reporters, photographers, a few curious onlookers. News of what had happened the night before had begun to circulate, quietly at first, then virally. By early afternoon, it had reached the steps of Buckingham Palace, and now, less than 24 hours later, Corporal James Ellis returned, but this time he wasn't alone. He stepped out of a discreet black vehicle, accompanied by a sharply dressed man with a royal insignia pinned to his lapel, a senior representative from the palace. James wore the same uniform, the same polish, the same posture. Nothing had changed, except how the world now looked at him. As he approached the entrance, cameras clicked in rapid bursts. But inside, the moment was even heavier. The general manager of La Couronne stood at the front waiting, not with security, but with open hands and a bowed head. "Corporal Ellis," he said softly, "on behalf of this establishment I offer my sincerest apologies. It would be an honor to welcome you properly this evening." Behind him, the hostess, the same one who had turned James away, stood at the check-in desk. Her face had gone pale. She said nothing. Her eyes dropped quickly when James met them, offering only a stiff, quiet nod. The maître d' led James into the restaurant. It was full, every table occupied. But as he passed through the marble-floored dining room, something remarkable happened. No one spoke. Guests stood. Conversations stopped. The clink of glasses, the rustle of menus, all fell silent. They stood not out of fear, not out of obligation, but out of respect. James was guided to the best table in the house, a corner table with a panoramic view of the city through tall windows. The general manager pulled out his chair himself. Apologies were made. But James didn't gloat. He didn't correct anyone. He simply nodded and sat, straight-backed, dignified, the same as he had been the night before. The only difference was now. Everyone else had changed. James dined alone, just as he had planned months ago. The meal, prepared by the head chef himself, was flawless, but it wasn't the food he would remember. It was the silence, the quiet reverence that followed him from the moment he entered to the moment he stood to leave. No one disturbed him. No one dared. He ate with the same calm composure he had shown the night before, pausing now and then to glance out the window, as if imagining what his father might have thought of all this. Not the apology, not the cameras, just the fact that the uniform had been acknowledged for what it truly was. When he stepped outside, the same black vehicle was waiting, but this time a liveried driver stepped forward with a small envelope in hand, cream-colored, unmarked except for a gold-embossed crest on the seal. James opened it quietly, read the short message inside, and nodded. "Thank you for representing us with honor. W. No title, no fanfare, just a signature, and a message that meant more than the press, the table, or the cameras ever could. He never sought revenge, never asked for recognition. All he wanted was to honor a memory, and to keep a quiet promise." As the car pulled away from the curb, the crowd that had lingered earlier began to disperse. Inside the restaurant, the mood had shifted again. The same hostess who had blocked the door the night before was no longer at the front desk. By morning, staff would confirm she'd been placed on leave. But James never spoke of it, never mentioned her name, because in his world, justice didn't need to be loud. It just needed to stand still and let others finally see. He didn't yell. He didn't argue. He didn't demand to be seen. He simply stood with grace, walked away with dignity, and the world followed. In a society quick to judge by appearances, by uniforms, by surface impressions, one man reminded us that true honor doesn't shout. It simply shows up and endures, quietly, until the truth speaks for itself. Now, we ask you, have you ever been judged by what you wore before anyone knew who you were? Was James right to walk away silently? Or should he have demanded respect in that moment? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And if this story moved you, subscribe for more true and inspiring Royal Guard stories. Turn on notifications so you never miss one. And share this video with someone who understands that real respect isn't about appearances, it's about character.